Hey everybody, welcome to our latest webinar with PilieroMazza, and we're going to be going over the DoD Mentor-Protégé program today. It's all about diversifying your contract pipeline, right? And given where we are right now, where everything is happening out there in the world of federal contracting, there's a lot of uncertainty. Clearly, there's a lot of questions about where things are going. One thing that is certain is that certain programs will likely have fewer cuts, fewer issues happening, and a number of them will be within DoD. So with that, we thought it would be a good time to go through the DoD Mentor Protege program, juxtapose it with the SBA program, and talk through some of the unique aspects of it here. My name is Cy Alba. I'm a partner with PilieroMazza in our GovCon group. I spend about half my time in GovCon, half my time with our corporate and M&A practice, but do all things government contracts and a lot of corporate work as well. And I'm here with my colleague, Krissy. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Krissy Crallé. I'm a first-year associate with PilieroMazza. I summered with them a couple years ago while I was still in law school, and I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about the DoD's Mentor-Protégé program.
Yeah, perfect. I know there are some issues, like I said, differences, things to think about. Um, and this is just a little bit about us too, just generally all the different practice areas that we have from IP, all the GovCon work that we do, labor and employment. We have a construction practice, our litigation group, pretty much a full service offering for all those government contractors or people who work in various commercial sectors as well. So just a little bit about us. All right. And then what we're kind of going to go through today, like I said, it's all about the DoD program. It's all about the differences between DoD and SBA. Why is it interesting? What does it mean to be a mentor? Because it is quite different from the SBA program. What about being a protege? How do you get in? How do you find them? What does the package look like? The various elements, and because again, very different from SBA, and then some of the later reporting requirements and what you have to submit on a regular basis to stay compliant on an ongoing basis. So with that, Chris, you want to kind of kick us off and let's talk through some of these things.
Sure. So, as an overview of the DoD's Mentor-Protégé program, it was first established in the 1990s, which is earlier than both the SBA's 8A and all small Mentor-Protégé programs, which are now combined into one Mentor-Protégé program. But it was made permanent in the NDAA of 2023. And the regulations for the DoD's Mentor Protege program are housed in the DFARS at Appendix I, the policy and procedures for the DoD pilot Mentor Protege program. And so the purpose of the program is at I-100, and that is twofold. One, it's to enhance the capabilities of eligible small business concerns to perform as subcontractors and suppliers under DoD contracts, but then also contracts outside of the DoD. And then also it's to increase those small businesses' participation. And this is done through education and collaboration with large businesses, hoping to increase competitiveness of small businesses in the defense marketplace as I said, both suppliers and subcontractors.
Yeah, and I think as talking about some of the juxtaposition, which we'll get into more on this slide, but it's interesting to note there that the DoD's program is all about creating a broader supplier base, not necessarily in the prime contract arena, which is what a lot of the SBA mentor protege program seems to do. It's not really for that per se, but a lot of the companies that get into the SBA's mentor protege program do it to have access to prime contract set aside work. Whereas a lot of the DoD focus for the DoD's program is about supplying as a subcontractor and growing the supplier base through that process, which then could naturally lead to the ability getting experience, past performance, and then ultimately the ability to do prime work. But there's a lot of focus on subcontracting and having the mentor provide you with subcontracting opportunities and help you through that process. So just an interesting note there before we get into some of the more specific juxtapositions.
Right. So thanks, Sai. Specifically, we can talk about the overview of the differences between DoD and SBA's programs. So as some of you might know, the SBA only allows proteges to have two mentors, whereas the DoD only allows one mentor at a time. Now, a mentor can have as many proteges as they would like, but a protege is only allowed to have one mentor. And for the length of the agreements, SBAs can last 6 years, whereas DoDs can last up to 5 years, but they typically are only 3. In extraordinary circumstances, they could last up to 5, but that extension would have to be approved. And then on the SBA side, the mentor can be small, whereas for DoD, the mentor must be large. And then the biggest difference maybe is that the SBA is not agency specific. So the SBA's program, you can be in a mentor-protege relationship and use that relationship throughout all of the agencies, whereas the DoD's program is specific to the DoD. And you can participate in both programs at the same time, but as Sai mentioned, both programs, they're very different and they have different goals. So it depends on what your goals as a firm are.
Yeah, and another just note to just drill down on some of these issues. First, if you're in the SBA program or you're going to apply for the SBA Mentor Protege program and you already have a DoD mentor, or if you're looking to get to continue your SBA Mentor Protege program, in the interim you get a DoD mentor. SBA has started to ask questions to have you explain why you need both of them and what the difference is. So if the DoD mentor is providing identical or very, very similar assistance to what you're seeking in the SBA's mentor protege application, SBA could deny the SBA program application because they'd say, well, you're already getting that, so we're not going to let you seek the same assistance here. So that's one thing of note. It doesn't necessarily count against you though for those two mentors. They just want to know that you're not getting the same assistance. The other thing I'll note is that SBA recently clarified that while you have a 6-year period potentially with each mentor in its program, so it's a 3-year base period, I guess you'll call it, plus a 1 3-year option. If you've never had another mentor, SBA will allow you to have that same company be your mentor for another full term. So if you've never had another mentor, or if you are a mentor and your protege has never had another mentor under SBA's program, you could actually have a full 12-year run. Whereas with DoD, as Krissy said, you get the 3-year period. And then if you can give some rationale for why it should be extended, you could, in theory, get up to 5 years. The other thing I'll note is that there's sort of an interesting gap in the SBA's regulations versus DoD's as to joint ventures. So the DoD program has sections in it in the regulations themselves, which clearly contemplate that once you're in the program, the mentor and the protege could do work in the form of a joint venture, which is very, very common in the SBA's program. In fact, a lot of people even confuse the joint venture with the mentor protege application or mentor protege program itself. They think they're one and the same, and they're not. They're completely different. You could have one without the other. But with DoDs, arguably, if you have a joint venture, it's not automatically excluded for purposes of affiliation under SBA's rules. Because if you go and you look at SBA's regulations and you go check under 121.103 B6, that part of the regulations says that you can't be found affiliated for uh, any assistance being provided under any federal mentor-protege program, which would clearly cover DoD. However, under 121.103 H2 2, that section says that a protege and its SBA approved mentor can form a joint venture without being affiliated. It doesn't specifically say that it can be any mentor in any program. Now, there isn't an OHA case that I'm aware of that has actually found affiliation, like directly said the DOD Mentor Protege program does not protect you from affiliation for forming a joint venture if your size protested. But the regulation text itself suggests there isn't automatic protection there. So just be aware if you're in a DOD mentor protege relationship and you form a joint venture, it's not entirely without risk because of the specific text of the SBA's regulations. Because if there's a size protest of a particular contract, it goes to SBA always, no matter what your contract is or where it was awarded. If it's a set aside and you get a size protest, SBA will adjudicate that and they will apply SBA's rules. And so that's why it's important to understand this kind of distinction or the interstice in the SBA's rules on this, because there is some risk. So I just note that as well. It's just an interesting point.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my slide wouldn't advance. So from there, why would you want to participate in DoD's Mentor-Protégé program? So for mentors, you can receive compensation for their costs associated with the Mentor-Protégé agreement. And this can be in a cost reimbursement fashion, or it can also be credit towards your small business contracting goals. And if you choose the cost reimbursement method as a mentor, you will be reimbursed. You could be reimbursed through a standalone contract, or you could modify an existing contract to add a cost reimbursable contract line item number for your developmental assistance costs. And then on the protege side, you'll receive guidance from a top performing DoD prime, and you can receive new market opportunities, and it could increase your credibility.
Yeah, and that's just to point it out too. There is no reimbursement mechanism under the SBA's program. The SBA's program allows you to do other things like take ownership in the protege, which arguably DoD program does not let you do, and it lets you participate, like I said, in joint ventures, which there's that open question about DoD. But the big draw for DoD and these very large primes, especially those that participate, it's to get direct reimbursement. And so there has to be budgeted line items. And for a number of years, there actually was no budget line item for that reimbursement piece of it. You could just get credit. The mentor could just get credit. So, well, I think Krissy will talk about that a little bit more here.
Yeah, thanks. So specifically for mentors who can participate. So as we said, different from the SBA's program, a mentor in the DoD's program must be an other than small business concern first. But it also needs to be eligible, it needs to meet basic requirements. So it needs to be eligible to perform on federal contracts, needs to be qualified to assist and contribute to the Mentor-Protégé program's goals, have good financial health and character, not be debarred or suspended, and have received DoD contracts and subcontracts totaling 25 million or more during the prior fiscal year. So we're talking about large businesses here, really. You must also be an active DoD prime contractor with a subcontracting plan. And then you'll also need to be approved by the director of the Office of Small Business Programs through a mentor application. And just to jump back to number 5 on the list here, so you do need to be an other than small business concern, as I noted, but there are exceptions to that. And then you could have also graduated from the 8A Business Development Program. And the exceptions would need to be approved by the Office of Small Business Programs as well.
What's also odd about the DoD program is that if you're already in the program and then the mentor gets debarred or suspended, it can continue to provide the assistance and you still get that protection, which is just an interesting kind of nuance, just odd.
So how do you apply as a mentor? So there's a lot of required documentation, and this is all listed in DFAR's Appendix I-105. But as an overview, you'll need a statement that you're currently performing on one contract with an approved subcontracting plan under DoD, and that you're eligible for federal contract awards. You'll need a summary about your company, which will include your company profile, historical and recent accomplishments, and if applicable, information about the small business program's participation in the 8A program. And then you'll need a description of your ability to provide assistance and how it will increase the subcontracting opportunities of the small disadvantaged businesses in your vendor space. You'll need to detail the total amount of your contracts and subcontracts received in the prior 2 fiscal years, and then also the total dollars and percentage of subcontracts awarded in the prior 2 fiscal years. So that will also need to detail the total dollar and percentage of awards specifically made to small disadvantaged businesses, and then you'll need to show separately your DoD contracts and other agency contracts. So typically, you'll need to allow 10 business days for your application to be approved, but around 1 week is average. And there is a template available in DFAR's I-105 as well. So moving on to who can participate as a protege. So to participate as a protege, the business must have less than half the size standard of its primary NAICS code, which is different from the SBA's because you can qualify as a protege under a NAICS code, which is not your primary in the SBA Mentor-Protégé program. Then you'll need to not be owned or managed by individuals or entities with stock options or convertible securities in the mentor. And then you'll need to be at least one of the following: a small disadvantaged business, an owned and controlled by an Indian tribe, a native Hawaiian organization, veteran-owned small business, woman-owned small business, hub zone, the traditional set-asides that we see. So as a protege, where do you find a mentor? So typically you would want to start off with the question, which businesses are you currently doing business? Talk to the people in your circle first. Then you can reach out to businesses that align with your interests, and you can look at the DoD subcontracting directory for more information. And then also DoD publishes a Mentor-Protégé program approved mentor list. So if you just Google DOD MPP approved mentor list, it'll pop up and you'll be able to see who's already approved to be a mentor. Make sure you research your business of interest. do your due diligence before you enter your agreement.
Yeah, and I'll say too, a lot of the eligible mentors out there, because of the way the program has been set up for years and the size of the DoD contracts that you have to have, it's a much smaller group, I guess more exclusive, whatever you want to call it, than the SBAs, whereas sort of anyone can be a mentor so long as you can show SBA that you have the capability to provide the support you're promising. With the DoD program, there are those specific requirements. So including the large contract values, prime contract values. And so really the largest companies, they may not necessarily have the wherewithal or desire to just take on a bunch of new proteges or to swap people out or whatever, right? So it's not as open and it's not as fluid, I guess, as the SBA program is. Um, the other thing to note as well is that though it could be better to look for companies that potentially weren't or aren't on the approved list, but you know that they're growing, or potentially just got large awards or are moving into the space more and now could qualify because those companies might not have proteges already. They might not understand the program as well. It's not like your Boeings and your Lockheeds and your Raytheons and those guys that have been in there and been doing this, right? And so trying to find those newer companies could be a good opportunity to get in. That being said, I think going with other organizations that you work closely with or that you're a part of, for instance, if you're a serviceable vet company, are you a member of the National Veteran Small Business Coalition? Their conference is coming up next month in Orlando. That's one I'll be there, and our group will be there. And that's a place too where the folks at the NVSBC really do work closely with the members there to try to help them and to foster relationships. And at those kinds of conferences, you could find those larger companies. Those are bigger conferences, or that particular one is a bigger conference, just like the National 8A Conference, for instance, is a bigger conference, and a lot of the big primes are there as well. However, keep an eye out for some of the smaller conferences. So there's a Missile Defense Conference in Huntsville, and I think it's in August, I want to say, and that conference tends to be smaller, but also that's a particular sort of niche area. So if you're looking to get in on that type of work, or if you think that you could provide the kind of assistance to some of those prime contractors, you might find different prime contractors at those conferences, or there'll be fewer small businesses that are vying for eyes, I guess, or time to talk to some of the primes. And make sure also, no matter what conferences you're going to, that you're participating in the matchmaking. Because if you're every one of them that I know of has a matchmaking opportunity. And that's a good place to sit down and at least get the opportunity to sit down and talk to some of the potential mentors there. And if they're doing DoD work, they could be a potential mentor for you in the DoD program, and it would help you diversify, especially if you're a company, let's say you've done a lot of work with NASA or you've done a lot of research and development work for NASA. And some of these other ones are HHS, things that you know are getting cut or being targeted right now. That same sort of research, while there will likely be cuts at DoD also, there are opportunities at DoD that could survive or more likely to survive the current changes. So it's just something where it could be a good opportunity in places to go to and think about how to pivot and work with some of them. Also, there are other groups out there, not to like plug some of the people that I work with, but you've got like GovMates, for instance. GovMates is a great organization. I work with them a lot and refer clients there, and they help matchmaking, right? They help put companies together. If you're an 8A company and or you're thinking about going to the 8A program, I'm a member of the board of the Bowie Business Innovation Center out of Bowie State, and there's an accelerator program we run a couple times a year. I think the next cohort, I think, has already had everybody signed up for it. But I do trainings for some of the 8A companies there, and that's a good networking opportunity to meet other companies that could put you in touch with people. So there's various opportunities to meet people, and I would say just go to events if you can swing it. Try to search for maybe some of the smaller events, but also the larger ones are very good for general networking. Um, and there's one of the questions, just kind of repeat some of those. So there's the national, I think it's actually called the National Small Business Conference. It used to be the National 8A Conference. That happened already. It's like every February. That's a good one. The National Veteran Small Business Coalition Conference, or they call it VETS. So this one's VETS 25. What's interesting about VETS 25, it's going to be in Orlando in a few weeks through the National Veteran Small Business Coalition. It's not just for veterans, right, or serviceable vet companies. It's for everyone. So it's a fairly large conference. It's been growing every year. I find it to be very good. There's the Missile Defense Conference that is happening in Huntsville in August. There's Gold Coast, which happens in the San Diego area. That might have already happened. Um, Trying to think of some of the other ones. There's just a number of them that go on. Soft Week is another one that can be good. That one though tends to be very large, so people can get lost in the shuffle. So yeah, so just think about, look around. Also look for your industries specifically. You don't necessarily want to go to like a manufacturing conference if you have nothing to do with the manufacturing industry, right? But if you are looking to do manufacturing, or if you do some form of manufacturing or supply of product, then those conferences could be best for you. And it's not something that maybe is all over the place, or if a bunch of government contractors always go there or always talk about it, or small businesses always talk about it, like the National 8A Conference or NBSBC or those. It might be a smaller one, but if it's specific to your industry, it can be much more effective. Um, and some of the other ones, maybe I found to be less critical, but if there's anything that you see that is in your industry, I would go. It can't hurt to, you might spend a couple days at a conference. If it's not one that really is conducive to good matchmaking, then But I would recommend getting out there, especially if you're a newer company or smaller company trying to get started. It's always hardest to get the first contact, right? But once you've met one, it's easier to meet two. Once you've met two, it's easier to meet 10. So just really think about that.
Thanks, Sai. That's great advice. And we will have our contact information at the end of the presentation. So if you need to follow up with Sai on any of those conference recommendations, you can shoot him an email and he can certainly get all that information over to you. So now you found a mentor and you need to submit your mentor-protégé proposal package. What does that include? So it will include an executive summary. It will include your actual mentor-protégé agreement, which the requirements are listed in DFARS Appendix I-106, and we're going to talk about that more and in greater detail in the coming slides. But the rest of the proposal package also includes your benefits and return on investment statement, and then technical and cost proposals, which are your technical cost summaries, labor hours and salaries, milestone charts, technology transfer, business development, and manufacturing and non-manufacturing agreements. So specifically, the mentor-protégé agreement. As we talked about a little earlier, there are three types of ways you can structure your mentor-protégé agreement. There's the direct reimbursed agreement, which is the cost reimbursement method that we talked about. There's the credit agreements, which is the credit towards your small business subcontracting goals. And then there's this hybrid option that's a combination of both, where 1 year has to be credit and then 1 to 2 years must be direct reimbursed. So for your direct reimbursed agreements, your mentor receives the reimbursement for allowable costs, and the allowable costs are the developmental assistance to the protege. You start on the day funds are obligated, and then that agreement is submitted to the DOD's Office of Small Business Programs. Whereas your credit agreement, as mentioned, you receive credit towards your subcontracting goal. The credit is based on the developmental assistance to the protege, and it starts on the day that you're approved by the DOD, which is submitted to the DOD's Defense Contract Management Agency. So the elements of the MTA. As I mentioned, these are all listed in the DFARS Appendix I-107. It's a really long list, so we'll try to go through some of the main important ones, or the bigger ones. So you're going to need your name, address, email, phone number of both companies, and signatures. Then you're going to need your NAICS code representing supplies or services provided by the protege to the mentor. And in that, you'll need a statement that the protege does not exceed the NAICS code size standard. You'll also need to include a variety of compliance statements, which we'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide. And then you'll need to include an assessment of the developmental needs of the protege. You'll need to formulate a protege developmental program, which we'll also talk about in a future slide. You'll need to have your assistance mentor will provide the protege for understanding certain regulations, the estimated dollar value, the type of subcontracts, and the timeline of awards to the protege from the mentor, the term of the program's participation, and then also you'll need to include your termination procedures in the event the MPA is terminated, and we'll have a slide on that towards the end. So the compliance statement for the mentor-protege agreement. As I mentioned, there are many. So you will need to provide assurances to a variety of facts. So first, you'll need to assure that you are eligible to participate in the program. This will need to be done by the mentor and the protege. You'll need to assure that the mentor does not share ownership or management of the protege, whether that's directly or indirectly. That the mentor does not have an agreement to merge with the protege in the future, and that the mentor's owners, managers are not the parent, child, spouse, et cetera, of an owner or manager of the protege.
Yeah, and those, I'll note too, is actually more broad than the SBA's rules from just generally, if you're looking at affiliation or presumptions of affiliation for familial identity of interest. SBA's rules are more narrow, and that's something just generally, I would say, keep in mind if you're thinking about affiliation rules or you're looking at any of the mentor protege programs or any other programs dealing with small businesses out there at any agency. SBA is far more active in updating its regulations. You know, they just did that big omnibus regulation. It's titled the Hub Zone Rule, but it was much broader than that. That came out and went final in January, and they're also going to redo, from what we've heard, the mentor protege rules and the joint venture rules. And that might be probably not this year because of the administration change and some of the rules that they've put out on new regulations, but most likely next year. So there will be active changes on the SBA side, and they historically have been much more active in changing the rules on probably every few years, something is changing. Whereas DOD hasn't done that as much. And so they often will make these rules and they'll just sit there because this is not DOD's primary focus, right? Now, it is mandated by Congress. So that's also, I think, important to note given what is moving through with the new administration and some of the comments that like Pete Hegseth has made about job titles, job positions within DoD, meaning federal employees, but also programs and whether or not they're statutorily mandated, or whether or not a program would exist in a time of war and using that as a basis for what is critical for DoD specifically. Um, that is something where, because this is a statutory program, DoD is required to have it and they have to keep it going. So that's also something to note. But with SBA, that is one of its primary purposes, right? The statute that created SBA and the statutes after that all talk about that. And so they update their regulations very often. The other thing I'll note here is that while there's been a lot of talk about what's going to happen to the small business programs, our set aside programs, quote unquote DEI, or certain ones, first of all these programs, even 8A program, right, Hub Zone programs, all of them are statutory. So unless Congress were to eliminate them, they're going to exist. The other thing that is interesting is that the House Small Business Committee pushed through the committee last week, I believe, a piece of a bill that who knows if it's going to come out in a bill in the near future or if it's going to get roped into the 2026 NDAA, which a lot of stuff just goes in there these days, past decade. But they pushed through a proposal to codify the rule of two. And for those who don't know, the rule of two is currently just a regulation, a regulatory requirement that if there are two or more small businesses that can perform work at a fair and reasonable price, that the requirement has to be set aside for small business participation. So to folks that thought that there was risk to the small business programs with this Congress or with the current administration, I just wanted to note that just came out of the House Small Business Committee, and the House being the more hot-headed or whatever you want to call it branch, right? Or as opposed to the Senate, it's telling that even the House Small Business Committee is still pushing through that idea. So it's just something to note.
Thanks, Sai. So continuing with the compliance statements, as I said, there are many. You will also need to assure that the mentor has not, in the past 2 years, employed an officer, director, principal stockholder, managing member, or key employee of the protege. And then that the mentor has not, in the past 2 years, engaged in a joint venture with the protege, unless that joint venture was approved by SBA to make an offer on a contract, which this is different. This is another nuanced joint venture requirement separate from what Sai was discussing at the beginning of the presentation. Then the mentor is not the primary party providing contracts to protege, either directly or indirectly, and this is measured by the dollar value of the contract. You'll need to assure, I'm going to skip over the SBA one, you'll need to assure that the protege's commitment to comply with reporting requirements and review during the duration of the agreement. And then finally, you'll need to assure that SBA has not made a determination of affiliation and control. So the second element of the agreement that we're going to talk a little bit about is the developmental program for the protege. And this is going to describe the type of assistance that will be provided to the protege. That assistance will need to increase the protege's ability to participate in federal contracts or subcontracts. It will also need to increase small business subcontracting opportunities in industries where the small businesses are not dominant in the vendor space. The factors to assess the protege's developmental progress, including specific milestones for each type of assistance. There will need to be quantitative and qualitative benefits laid out to the DoD if there are any. And then you'll want to include goals for the awards the protege can compete outside of the program. The last part of the MPA we'll talk about is the termination procedures. And these are requirements that are required to be included in the MPA. So the mentor must provide the protege written notice of proposed termination. They'll need to include specific reasons for the termination, 30 days in advance notice of the proposed termination, and then the protege will need to be allowed 30 days to respond, and they can offer rebuttal findings or a remedial program. Following that, the mentor must either withdraw the termination notice and continue participation in the relationship or issue a notice of termination. And that notice of termination must include the decision regarding the termination for cause, and that is a final decision not reviewable by DoD. The other requirement will be that the protege must provide the mentor written notice to the mentor 30 days in advance of proposed voluntary termination. And then termination notices must be sent to the agency approving the agreement and the Defense Contract Management Agency conducting the annual review. For reimbursable agreements, copies must be sent to the program manager and the contracting officer. So we have some important compliance considerations for when you're developing your mentor-protege agreement. We've talked to some of these already, but we'll just go over them again because they're important. So as mentioned, mentors may have several proteges at one time, but proteges may only have one mentor at one time. The mentor-protege agreements cannot exceed 3 years from the date of contract or task order or contract modification as a separate cost reimbursable line item on existing contracts. The mentor-protege agreement cannot be longer than the protege's small business certification period. And the period of performance cannot exceed 3 years, as we mentioned, though there are extraordinary circumstances which allow extension. They can't, in total, go past 5 years. A new mentor application is required if the company changes its name. And then all of those assurances that we talked about on those couple of slides and anything that you submit is subject to the False Claims Act. So how do you submit your mentor-protege agreement proposal? So you are able to do an informal introductory briefing between the agency, mentor, and protege before the submission of a proposal so that you can get your questions answered and make sure that you have everything required to submit. And then once you're ready to submit, for the credit agreement, you'll submit that agreement application to the Defense Contract Management Agency. And then for direct, reimbursed, or hybrid agreements, that will be submitted to the Office of Small Business Programs. And you'll need to include with that agreement application an endorsement letter from the program manager, an endorsement letter from the Office of Small Business Programs, and then a funding request. So moving to our last topic here, reporting requirements. So you'll need to fill out a standard form 294, and this can be submitted through the electronic subcontracting reporting system. And this is required, there is semi-annual reports required for a mentor, and those are due 30 days before the end of the reporting period, which runs between March 31st and September 30th. And you must include the following performance data: the dollars obligated, if you're doing a reimbursable agreement, expenditures, dollars credited, new awards, technical management assistance provided by the mentor, extensions, increases to statement of works and additional payments, the amount of payments and progress payments, any loans, federal contract awards, assistance obtained by the mentor, changes to your agreement, and then a narrative of the developmental assistance, impact of the program, problems encountered, and milestones. And again, that's 2 times a year. For the proteges, you only need to report once a year, and that is by October 31st. And you'll need to address the progress made in the past year, including your employment, revenues, participation in DoD contracts. And this can be submitted as part of the mentor's report for the September 30th period. Finally, the DCMA performance reviews. So this is an annual performance review of progress and accomplishment. It will verify the data of the semi-annual reports received by the mentor. And then you must provide whether all costs reimbursed the mentor reasonably occurred, and whether the mentor protege accurately reported progress. So that is the end of the slides that we have. Sai, do you have any additional comments you'd want to make?
So I think the main thing is that it's just a very different program, right? There's a lot of different elements to it, and it's more specific. So if you're really trying to get in the door, if you're a newer company, it's obviously hard to find potential mentors because they tend to be larger. They have to have larger contracts. They have to have more relationships with the folks at DoD and in that space. But at the same time, it's geared towards companies that are coming into DoD for the first time, and I think probably more geared to, I would say, even smaller companies because of the subcontracting focus. So especially if you've got some sort of unique qualifications, product, service, and also if you're pitching yourself to potential mentors, or if you're really trying to use this program, think about what you could bring to the table that's somewhat of a unique technology or something that's driving innovation forward, because the program really does like to focus on that aspect of things, and the non-traditional defense contractors, right, or non-traditional contractors, and is really trying to push DoD towards finding new and unique technologies or critical services, supplies, things it can really use. Um, Especially now, I think what we're going to start seeing is more of a focus on, in particular, like warfighting. Drones is also a very big one. There's a lot of technology progress in drone technology, anti-drone technology, including anti-drone, like commercial drone technologies. I think there's going to be a lot of cyber warfare things that are going to continue to pick up. So think about that as well. And another thing you might want to think about if you're trying to get into DoD, you're trying to make yourself more viable as a potential protege to some of these larger mentors, potentially looking at SBIR releases at any agency that fits either things that you do or even things that are tangential to what you do. Because if you find something that's somewhat tangential to what you do, or might not be exactly where you tend to work on a regular basis, if you see an SBIR out there that you could pivot into relatively easily, or maybe there are people in your organization or yourself that have some expertise there, then getting the technology funded through an SBIR program, as long as you protect it correctly with all the somewhat complex IP rules. I think I've done another presentation on SBIR, STTRs, and certainly other presentations on IP protection in the federal space. So I think they're on YouTube if you want to kind of pull them up. We might do another one soon as well. But if you use the SBIR program to create new technology and you protect it correctly, you get 20 years of protection now. And so the government will only get restricted rights in the technology that you've created, even if, now there's some caveats to that, but we don't really have time to get into, but even if the government paid for all of it, right, you can still restrict the government's rights. And if it's something that other agencies need or have put out, or even other DoD uh, um, activities have put out there, using that to create new technology and then taking that and going to potential mentors and saying, this is what I have. We have this unique technology that we've we've either outlined or we've gone through the prototype process. There's the opportunity there to pitch that new technology to a mentor and bring it to the table. They could use their contacts then. You want to make it sort of contingent on them helping you and being a good mentor, right? But if you get into the Mentor-Protégé program with them under DoD and they start pitching you as a subcontractor, as long as you protect your IP correctly in the subcontract, then that could be a great opportunity to get in front of DoD and to market yourself to potential mentors. So that's a potential avenue to get in to this program and to really market yourself. Or another option there, if there's something truly unique that you've gotten the SBIR, let's say, or you've even done direct development, right? Or you find a smaller company, you merge with them, or you buy a smaller company that has something interesting and unique. You could also then go to mentors or directly pitch yourself for potential OTA opportunities, because that's another thing. It's sort of tangential again to DoD mentor protege, but DoD is really going to start moving to a lot of OTA, which is other transaction authority contracting. It's a non-FAR contract. I think we have other presentations on OTAs that you could look for, and I'm putting out a whole blog series on OTAs right now as well over the next few weeks, because DoD is pushing for commerciality and pushing for OTAs because they're faster, they're non-FAR based, they're more protected from protests, things of that nature. So any of these ideas of getting new technology or creating new technology in particular areas could help you get into this, pitch yourself to mentors, get direct work through OTAs, get other funding through SBIRs, right? Thinking about all these different things at the same time could help you get a leg up in the DoD space in particular, which I think could be very important going forward. And if you're looking at some of the SBIRs, let's just use that as an example, that a lot of the DoD activities are putting out there. it'll also give you an idea of where they want things to go in the future. So a lot of like phase ones in the SBIR program are proof of concept. So they're ideas. So if you have people that are qualified, or you can get the right people that are qualified, right, to go after and develop some of these new technologies on the government fundings, or it's more like attempting to prove the proof of concept. If it works, and you're like, yeah, this is a good idea, then they can fund the prototype phase, or it could even move into an OTA and you can fund the prototype phase. And then you can either go through what they call phase three of the SBIR program, which is to commercialize it, and you can get outside funding and things like that through private equity. And I do know as well, I've talked to a number of private equity funds that are very interested in actually getting into the federal space right now. They think that the next few months could be, uncertain, rocky, as everybody knows who works in this space. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. But as we get into Q4, Q1, 2026 calendar year, I'm saying, then you could start to see, or I think there's an expectation that you'll see sort of a new normal, or even a purchasing surge to get back to either backfilling. I know with, for instance, FDA, they're already hiring contractors because so many people left the agency that they realize that critical functions are being harmed. And so I think that kind of thing is going to continue happening as well, and it'll allow other opportunities. So make sure you're keeping your eyes open for all of these sort of non-traditional mechanisms, that you're going to various conferences. Keep your ear to the ground to hear various new opportunities that might be out there. Look at the SBIRs, look at the STTRs that are coming out. If you're networking at some of these events or some of these conferences, talking to other companies that might do things that aren't directly competitive to you, but are complementary to you, and how you could work together, because then two eyes are better than one and five eyes are better than two, right? So if you're forming these organizations, or if you have a group of people that you're talking to, a group of companies, I'm working with another client right now where there's a group of 5 or 6 different companies that all have different pieces of the puzzle for some technology that DoD found to be interesting, and they formed a consortium, because you don't need to go through the formal consortiums to get OTAs. And they pitched the idea, DoD liked it, and they have an OTA now. They got through the prototype phase, and the DoD really likes it, and they're going now into the manufacturing phase, the development phase. So it it's one of those things that if you get the right technology, you get the right people together, you can take these things and parlay them into other things, including the DoD Mentor-Protégé program, to pitch to mentors, or to pitch some of these non-traditional um, contracting types that DoD is going to continue to push forward, and all these commercial technologies that they want to see as well. So there could be opportunities even outside of the government space to develop some of these technologies and to sell them more broadly. So just it's just a lot of things to think about. There's going to be a lot of upheaval that everybody already knows, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, but there's also a lot of opportunities if you're looking in the right places and pivoting in the right ways, and if you're networking with the right folks. And so I would say keep going forward, and think about some of these things as the year goes on, and hopefully everyone finds success. So I guess I think we're out of time now. And thank you everyone for coming, and thanks Krissy for walking through everything for folks, and this DoD Mentor Protege program. If anyone has any questions, you've got our contact information. Just feel free to reach out, and we look forward to the next webinar. And again, check out our YouTube page. There's a lot of stuff on there too you can listen to on various topics. Thank you again, and look forward to the next one.
Thank you.